Black family arrested on vacation by racist cops, unaware the mother is an FBI director. The winding mountain road seemed to shed layers of stress with each ascending turn, like pages falling from an old calendar. Danielle Morrow watched through the car window as towering pines created dappled patterns of sunlight on the asphalt, their fresh scent seeping through the air conditioning. After 15 years with the FBI, working her way up to become one of its highest-ranking directors, she had mastered the art of compartmentalizing. Yet, even she had to admit that the past months had worn her thin, with back-to-back cases and the constant pressure of being one of the few Black women in her position. The Sunrise Peak Resort appeared around the final bend like a mirage of luxury, its modern architecture blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the afternoon sun, while meticulously maintained gardens created a gradient of greens that merged with the surrounding forest. Danielle glanced at her husband, Marcus, whose fingers drummed contentedly against the steering wheel. As a high school principal, he understood better than most the importance of these rare moments of escape. In the back seat, their children presented a study in teenage contrasts. 15-year-old Aaron had his headphones on, trying to maintain his carefully cultivated air of indifference, though Danielle caught him sneaking appreciative glances at the resort's championship golf course. Beside him, 13-year-old Nia pressed her face against the window, all pretense of adolescent coolness abandoned as she pointed out the resort's Olympic-sized pool and the stable of horses in the distance. "Mom, did you see they have a rock-climbing wall?" Nia's excitement bubbled over as they pulled up to the entrance. "And look at that lake. Can we go kayaking?" Danielle smiled, feeling the first real surge of relaxation she'd experienced in months. "We can do whatever you want, sweetheart. That's what vacation is for." The valet approached their car with practiced efficiency, his professional smile flickering just slightly as he took in the family's appearance. It was a micro-expression Danielle had learned to recognize years ago, that momentary adjustment people made when their expectations met reality. Marcus caught her eye, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, but neither let it dim their enthusiasm. The lobby was a cathedral to luxury, with soaring ceilings and a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall. A crystal chandelier cast rainbow prisms across the marble floor, and the furniture looked expensive enough to require insurance. As they approached the front desk, Danielle noticed the subtle shifts in the other guests' behavior. The slight double takes, the whispered conversations behind manicure hands, the way some people suddenly found their phones fascinating. "Welcome to Sunrise Peak Resort." The receptionist greeted them, her professional smile firmly in place. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Morrow," Marcus replied, his deep voice carrying the warm authority that had made him such a respected principal. "The Lakeview Suite." The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard, and Danielle watched as surprise registered on her face, no doubt noting the suite's premium status and the length of their stay. Another micro-adjustment, another reset of expectations. "Of course, Mr. Morrow. We have you in our premium Lakeview Suite for 7 nights. Would you like assistance with your luggage?" As their bags were whisked away by efficient staff members, Danielle felt Aaron move closer to her. Despite his height, already taller than her at 15, he still sought her presence when feeling uncertain. "Everyone's staring," he muttered, low enough for only her to hear. "Let them," she replied softly, squeezing his shoulder. "We belong here just as much as anyone else." Their suite exceeded even the website's glossy promises. 2 bedrooms branched off from a spacious living area where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the lake below. A private balcony wrapped around the corner of the building, furnished with comfortable loungers and a small dining set. The bathrooms featured marble countertops and deep soaking tubs, while the main room boasted a fireplace and state-of-the-art entertainment system. "This is amazing." Nia twirled in the center of the room, her braids swinging. "Can we go explore?" "Please." Marcus laughed, the sound rich and relaxed. "Let's at least unpack first, princess. Then we can check out that lake you've been talking about since we left home." As the family settled in, Danielle found herself drawn to the balcony. The lake stretched out below like polished obsidian, reflecting the surrounding mountains in its mirror surface. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called to its mate. The tension in her shoulders, a constant companion during long hours at the bureau, began to ease. "Penny for your thoughts?" Marcus joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. 20 years of marriage had made his presence as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Just thinking how perfect this is," she replied, leaning back against him. No phones ringing with new cases, no early morning meetings, no crisis to manage. Just us.
Mom, Dad.
Aaron's voice carried from inside. "Nia's trying to claim the bigger bedroom." Marcus chuckled against her hair. "Well, almost perfect." The afternoon unfolded like a gift, each moment carefully unwrapped and savored. They explored the resort's grounds, their path taking them past manicured gardens and down to the lakeside dock. Other guests populated the various amenities, playing tennis on pristine courts, sipping cocktails by the infinity pool, heading out for horseback rides along marked trails. Danielle noticed the looks, of course, she always did. But here, surrounded by her family's joy and the natural beauty of their surroundings, she chose to let them slide away like water off glass. As they stood on the dock, watching the sun paint the lake in shades of gold and rose, Danielle felt a rare moment of perfect contentment. Aaron had shed his teenage reluctance enough to show Nia how to skip stones across the water surface, while Marcus took photos with a new camera he'd bought specifically for this trip. The peace of the moment seemed to seep into her very bones, promising the restoration she so desperately needed. Yet even in this idyllic setting, she couldn't completely silence the part of her that remained vigilant, that noticed the security guard who had passed by their location 3 times in the past hour, or the way certain guests gave their family a wide berth on the narrow dock. These were the realities she had learned to navigate throughout her career, throughout her life. But for now, watching her children laugh as another stone skipped perfectly across the lake's surface, she chose to focus on the joy instead of the shadows. The late afternoons stretched languidly into early evening as the Morrows made their way to the resort's boat rental dock. The setting sun cast long shadows across the water, and the air had taken on that golden quality unique to mountain evenings. Marcus had surprised them all by reserving a small pontoon boat for a sunset cruise, a perfect cap to their first day at the resort. "Have you ever driven a boat before, Dad?" Aaron asked, trying to mask his enthusiasm with teenage skepticism as they approached the rental kiosk. His attempt at nonchalance failed completely when Marcus handed him a life jacket, and genuine excitement broke through his careful facade. "I spent summers helping your grandfather with his fishing boat," Marcus replied, adjusting the straps on Nia's life jacket with practiced ease. "Though I suspect this might be a bit more sophisticated than Old Bluebell was." The boat rental attendant, a young man whose name tag read Kyle, seemed to be taking an unusually long time reviewing their reservation. His eyes kept darting between the computer screen and their family, his fingers tapping nervously on the keyboard. "I'll, need to check with my supervisor about this reservation," he finally managed, reaching for his radio. Danielle felt the familiar weight settle in her stomach. She'd seen this dance before, the unnecessary double-checking, the sudden need for supervisor approval, the implied questioning of their legitimacy. Marcus caught her eye, his expression saying everything without words. Here we go again. While they waited, other guests moved freely around them, picking up keys for their own rental boats with minimal verification. A white family of 5 received their keys after barely a glance at their resort ID, their children already scrambling onto their assigned vessel, while the parents signed the paperwork with casual ease. Finally, a supervisor appeared, a middle-aged woman with carefully highlighted hair and a clipboard held like a shield. "Is there a problem here, Kyle?" she asked, her voice carrying across the dock with unnecessary volume. "These people have a reservation for the Sunset Cruise pontoon, but I wanted to verify the premium suite guest list," Kyle replied, emphasizing these people in a way that made Nia shrink closer to her mother. The supervisor, whose name tag identified her as Patricia, scrutinized their resort passes and documentation with exaggerated thoroughness. "These areas are restricted to premium guests only," she explained slowly, as if speaking to children. "We need to be very careful about security." "We understand completely," Marcus responded, his principal's voice remaining steady despite the growing tension. "As you can see from our passes, we're staying in the Lakeview suite, which I believe qualifies as premium." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line as she found herself unable to deny their credentials. With visible reluctance, she nodded to Kyle to process their rental. As they finally boarded their assigned boat, Danielle noticed several other guests had stopped to watch the exchange, some openly filming with their phones. The boat's engine hummed to life under Marcus's capable hands, and they began to pull away from the dock. Danielle watched as Patricia immediately reached for her radio, speaking in hushed but urgent tones while gesturing in their direction. The knot in her stomach tightened. "Why did they make such a big deal about checking our reservation?" Nia asked, her young voice carrying notes of confusion and hurt. "The family before us didn't have to wait." Aaron's jaw clenched, his earlier excitement dimmed by the confrontation. "You know why, Nia," he said quietly, and Danielle's heart ached at the bitterness already present in her 15-year-old's voice. As they cruised across the lake, the beauty of their surroundings began to work its magic again. The water sparkled with reflected sunlight, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine and approaching evening. Marcus pointed out various birds diving for their dinner, and Nia's delight at spotting a family of ducks helped ease the tension from the dock incident. But Danielle's trained eye couldn't help but notice the patrol boat that had appeared shortly after their departure, maintaining a careful distance while following their general course. Even here on vacation, they were being watched, monitored, suspected. "Look," Aaron's voice broke through her thoughts. He pointed to where a deer had emerged from the treeline to drink from the lake, its reflection perfect in the still water near the shore. For a moment, they all sat in appreciated silence, watching the peaceful scene. The spell broke as the patrol boat's engine revved suddenly, cutting closer to their position. Two uniformed security officers aboard made no attempt to hide their scrutiny of the Morrow family. Their presence sent ripples across the water that scattered the deer and disturbed the serene surface of the lake. "Perhaps we should head back," Marcus suggested, noting the security boat's aggressive positioning. "It's getting close to dinner time anyway." As they turned back toward the dock, Danielle noticed more activity along the shoreline. Additional security personnel had appeared, and she could see Patricia, the dock supervisor, speaking with what appeared to be local police officers. The sight sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Mom," Nia's voice was small. "Why are there police cars in the parking lot?" Danielle shared a look with Marcus, years of shared experiences allowing them to communicate volumes in a single glance. They both knew what was coming, had experienced it too many times before, despite their professional accomplishments and social status. "Everything's going to be fine," Danielle assured her daughter, even as she watched more officers gathering at the dock. "Just remember what we've talked about. Stay calm, keep your hands visible, and let Dad and me do the talking." The sun, so beautiful moments ago, now seemed to be setting on their peaceful vacation with cruel irony. As they approached the dock, Danielle could see phones being raised to record, security personnel positioning themselves strategically, and the local police officers stepping forward with hands resting casually on their belts. Their simple family boat ride had somehow transformed into something else entirely, something all too familiar, yet no less painful for its familiarity. The weight of what was about to unfold settled over them like an invisible net, drawing tighter with each yard they drew closer to shore. The pontoon boat glided into its slip with Marcus's careful guidance, the gentle bump against the rubber guards seeming unnaturally loud in the tense atmosphere. The setting sun cast long shadows across the dock, where four figures waited with rigid postures and hands hovering near utility belts. Two wore the resort's security uniforms, while the others were clearly local police officers, their badges catching the dying light. "Step off the boat slowly, one at a time," the taller police officer commanded, his hand resting deliberately on his holster. Officer Davidson, as his nameplate read, moved forward with the practiced authority of someone used to controlling situations through intimidation. Marcus caught Danielle's eye, years of shared experiences condensed into a single look. "I'll go first," he said quietly, his principal's voice steady despite the situation. "Aaron, stay with your sister." The wood of the dock creaked under Marcus's careful steps as he disembarked. Immediately, Davidson moved forward, his partner flanking him. "Sir, we've received multiple complaints about unauthorized individuals in the restricted areas of the resort." "We're registered guests," Marcus replied, reaching slowly toward his back pocket. "I have our room keys and passes right here. Keep your hands where we can see them." Davidson's partner barked, causing Mia to jump and grab Aaron's arm. The second officer, Williams according to his badge, had drawn his taser. The scene was drawing attention. Resort guests had gathered at a safe distance, many with phones raised to record the unfolding drama. Danielle noticed some looking uncomfortable, but none stepped forward to intervene. The weight of familiar disappointment settled in her chest, the same weight she'd carried through countless similar situations. "Now listen carefully," Davidson continued, moving to handcuff Marcus despite his calm compliance. "We've had reports of suspicious activity around the boat dock, and your presence here has caused concern among other guests." "Concern?" Aaron's voice cracked with teenage indignation. "We were just having a boat ride. How is that suspicious?" "Aaron, please," Marcus cautioned, but the damage was done. Davidson's partner moved toward the boat, his attention now focused on the teenage boy. "Son, I'm going to need you to step back and lower your voice," Williams warned, his hand still on his taser. "Aggressive behavior will not be tolerated." Danielle moved then, positioning herself between the officer and her children. Her FBI training screamed at her to reveal her credentials, to end this farce immediately, but years of experience had taught her that timing was crucial in these situations. One wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, and things could escalate beyond repair. The darkening sky seemed to mirror the escalating tension on the dock, shadows lengthening as Officer Williams advanced toward Aaron. Danielle felt time slow, each heartbeat distinct as her training and maternal instincts warred within her. The weight of her FBI credentials pressed against her hip like a burning coal, but she knew from bitter experience that timing was everything in situations like this. "Step aside, ma'am," Williams ordered, his hand still hovering near his taser. "Your son needs to learn about respecting authority." Behind her, Danielle could feel Aaron trembling, not with fear, but with the same righteous anger that had gotten too many young black men killed. Mia's quiet sobs provided a heartbreaking soundtrack to the scene, while Marcus stood helplessly handcuffed, watching his family with desperate eyes. "My son," Danielle spoke, her voice carrying the weight of years of authority, "has done nothing to warrant your attention, Officer Williams. What I'm seeing is an abuse of power and a clear violation of our civil rights." Davidson snorted, taking a threatening step forward. "Lady, you don't want to start throwing around legal terms you don't understand. We're responding to multiple complaints about suspicious individuals in a restricted area." The crowd of onlookers had grown, their phones recording every moment. Danielle noticed several resort staff members hovering anxiously at the edges, including Patricia from the boat rental desk, who was wringing her hands and whispering urgently to a man in a manager's blazer. "I understand legal terms perfectly well," Danielle replied, her voice dropping to a register that had made hardened criminals confess. "Just as I understand that you're currently engaging in racial profiling, unlawful detention, and a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights." Something in her tone made both officers pause. Davidson's grip on Marcus's arm loosened slightly as he studied Danielle more carefully. "Ma'am, if you continue to interfere with our investigation." "Investigation?" Danielle's laugh held no humor. "Please, Officer Davidson, enlighten me about what exactly you're investigating. A black family enjoying a boat ride at a resort where they are registered guests? Or perhaps you'd like to explain why my husband is in handcuffs for the crime of existing in an upscale space." Williams's face flushed red. "If you're so well-versed in the law, maybe you'd like to prove it. Who exactly are you to be lecturing us about police procedure?" The moment had arrived. Danielle could feel it in the air, in the way both officers shifted uncertainly, in the hushed anticipation of the growing crowd. With deliberate movements, she reached for her credentials, noting how both officers tensed. "I'm FBI Director Danielle Morrow," she stated, her voice carrying across the now silent dock as she displayed her badge and ID. And you gentlemen have just created a situation that will require extensive explanation to your superiors. The change in atmosphere was immediate and electric. Davidson's face drained of color, while Williams took an involuntary step backward. From the crowd, someone whispered, "Oh shit," loud enough to carry across the water. We weren't informed," Davidson stammered, his earlier arrogance evaporating like morning mist. Clearly, Danielle cut him off. "Now I am going to explain exactly what's going to happen next, and you're going to listen very carefully." Her voice remained steady, but carried an edge sharp enough to cut steel. "First, you're going to remove those handcuffs from my husband immediately. Then, you're going to step back and maintain a professional distance from my family." The click of the handcuffs releasing seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. Marcus rubbed his wrists, anger simmering beneath his composed exterior as he moved to comfort Nia, who was still crying quietly. Director Morrow, the resort manager, had finally found his courage to approach. "I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for this misunderstanding. If there's anything we can do—" "This wasn't the misunderstanding," Danielle interrupted, her words precise and cutting. "This was a calculated response based on racial prejudice, and it will be addressed as such. I want the names and badge numbers of every officer involved, including your security personnel. I want access to all security footage of this incident, and I want it preserved immediately." The manager's face paled further as she continued, "And I want to be very clear. This isn't going away with comped rooms or free meals. What happened here today is exactly why we still need systemic change in law enforcement and hospitality services." Aaron had moved to stand beside his mother, his earlier anger transformed into pride as he watched her take control of the situation. The officers shifted uncomfortably, their earlier bravado replaced by the dawning realization of exactly how badly they had mishandled the situation. "Ma'am, Director," Williams corrected himself quickly, "we were just responding to calls from concerned guests." "And that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Danielle's voice carried across the dock, meant now for the crowd of onlookers as much as the officers. "The fact that a black family enjoying a vacation is automatically viewed as suspicious. That my husband can be handcuffed for simply existing in this space. That my children have to watch their father being treated like a criminal for doing absolutely nothing wrong." The setting sun had painted the sky in shades of purple and deep blue, the resort's lights creating golden reflections on the lake's surface. It would have been beautiful if not for the circumstances that had transformed their peaceful evening into this moment of confrontation and revelation. "This incident will be reported," Danielle continued, her voice carrying the weight of promised action. "Not just to your departments, but to the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Every person involved in escalating this situation will be held accountable." The impact of her words settled over the dock like a heavy blanket. The officers looked as though they wanted to sink into the wooden planks beneath their feet, while the resort staff huddled together, whispered conversations carrying tones of panic. The observers who had been so eager to record the confrontation earlier now seemed unsure whether to stay or flee. But Danielle's focus had shifted entirely to her family. Marcus held Nia close, murmuring quiet reassurances, while Aaron stood tall beside his mother, his earlier anger transformed into something more powerful, pride in watching his mother wield her authority to protect their family and stand up for what was right. The resort's grand lobby, with its soaring ceilings and elegant furnishings, had transformed into an impromptu command center. Security personnel hovered uncertainly near the exits, while the resort manager, Jonathan Pierce, perspired in his tailored suit as he attempted to handle damage control. The massive stone fireplace that had seemed so welcoming earlier now loomed like a silent judge over the proceedings. "Director Morrow," Pierce began again, his voice strained with forced professionalism, "I assure you the Sunrise Peak Resort has strict policies against discrimination of any kind. This unfortunate incident does not reflect our values or standards of service." Danielle sat perfectly straight in one of the lobby's plush armchairs, her posture radiating authority. The evening's events had stripped away any pretense of vacation relaxation, replacing it with the steel-spined FBI director who had faced down drug cartels and terrorist cells. "Mr. Pierce," she replied, her voice carrying across the lobby with precise clarity, "I've reviewed your resort's policies. They're beautifully written, carefully worded, and absolutely meaningless if your staff profiles guests based on their race. Your strict policies didn't prevent your security team from harassing my family. They didn't stop your boat rental supervisor from treating us like criminals. And they certainly didn't prevent the local police from handcuffing my husband in front of our children." Marcus sat beside her, his principal's composure masking the fury she could feel radiating from him. Up in their suite, Erin was watching over Nia, who had finally stopped crying but remained shaken by watching her father in handcuffs. The weight of their children's lost innocence hung heavy in the air between them. "We're prepared to offer you a full refund, of course," Pierce continued, mopping his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief. "And we'd like to extend a complimentary stay at any of our properties worldwide, at your convenience. Perhaps an upgrade to our presidential suite for the remainder of your current stay." "Mr. Pierce," Marcus spoke for the first time since entering the lobby, his deep voice carrying the same authority he used with troubled students, "do you understand that no amount of luxury can erase what our children witnessed today? That no complimentary stay can undo the trauma of seeing their father treated like a criminal?" The lobby had grown eerily quiet, other guests pretending not to eavesdrop while hanging on every word. The grand chandelier cast rainbow prisms across the marble floor, an ironic display of beauty in a moment of ugly truth. "We've already contacted our legal department," Pierce offered weakly. "They're prepared to discuss any reasonable settlement to avoid unnecessary publicity." Unnecessary publicity. Danielle's laugh held no humor. "Let me be very clear about what's going to happen next. This isn't going away with upgraded rooms or legal settlements. The officers who detained my husband will face formal complaints and investigations. Your security staff will undergo a complete review of their practices. And every moment of this incident, from the boat rental discrimination to the unlawful detention, will be examined in excruciating detail." She leaned forward slightly, her next words carrying the weight of promised action. "But more importantly, Mr. Pierce, this incident is going to serve as an example. An example of how racial profiling persists in supposedly exclusive spaces. An example of how Black families can't even vacation without facing discrimination. An example of why we need systemic change, not just carefully worded policies and empty apologies." The click of heels on marble announced the arrival of Patricia from the boat dock, now looking considerably less authoritative than she had earlier. She clutched a folder to her chest like a shield as she approached Pierce, whispering something urgently in his ear. His face paled further. "Director Morrow," he said after a moment, his voice strained, "it appears the incident has already begun circulating on social media. Several videos have been posted, and they're gaining significant attention." "Of course they are," Marcus responded, his tone bitter. "Everyone's brave enough to film injustice, but no one was brave enough to speak up while it was happening." Danielle reached for her husband's hand, feeling the tension in his grip. 20 years of marriage had taught them both how to navigate these waters, but the pain never really lessened. It just transformed into something more focused, more determined. "Mr. Pierce," Danielle said, rising from her chair with fluid grace, "I suggest you prepare your PR team for a very busy week. My office will be in touch regarding the formal complaints and investigations. In the meantime, we'll be returning to our room. Our original room, not your offered upgrade. I want every record of this incident preserved, including security footage, staff communications, and the initial complaints that led to this situation." Pierce nodded rapidly, likely already imagining the headlines and the impact on the resort's reputation. "Of course, Director. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation." "Yes," Danielle replied simply. "You will." As they walked toward the elevators, Danielle noticed how other guests quickly averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their phones or the lobby's architectural details. The same people who had watched her husband being handcuffed, who had filmed the incident instead of speaking up, now couldn't bear to meet her gaze. In the elevator, Marcus finally let his professional mask slip slightly. "The kids," he said softly. "How do we help them process this?" Danielle leaned into her husband's strength, feeling the weight of the evening settle fully onto her shoulders. We show them how to stand up with dignity, how to fight injustice with purpose instead of just anger. And we remind them that their parents will always protect them, even when the world isn't fair. The elevator doors opened to their floor, and they walked hand in hand toward their suite, where their children waited. Behind them, they could hear the growing commotion in the lobby as more staff arrived to handle the crisis. But for now, their focus was solely on their family, on healing the wounds this evening had inflicted, and on transforming this painful experience into purposeful action. The night air carried the scent of pine through their suite's open balcony doors, a cruel reminder of the peaceful vacation they'd hoped to have. But as Danielle watched Marcus gather their children into his arms, she knew this incident would become something more than just another painful memory. It would become a catalyst for change, a moment of truth that would force others to confront their biases and examine their actions. The real work was just beginning. The morning sun had barely crested the mountains when Danielle's phone began its relentless buzz. News alerts, text messages, and email notifications cascaded in a steady stream, each ping marking another ripple in the expanding wave of public response. The videos from the previous evening had spread across social media platforms with the velocity that only injustice caught on camera could achieve. #SunrisePeakShame is trending, Aaron announced from the suite's living room, his voice carrying a mix of anger and vindication as he scrolled through his phone. The one from the lady in the pink hat has over 2 million views already. She caught everything, Mom, from when they first approached the boat to when you showed your badge. Danielle stood on their private balcony, watching the morning mist rise off the lake while speaking quietly into her phone. Yes, Director Thompson, I understand the sensitivity of the situation. No, I don't intend to let this fade away, because this isn't just about my family anymore. Inside, Marcus sat with Nia at the dining table, helping her process the events through writing, a technique he developed over years of helping students deal with trauma. Their daughter's pen moved steadily across the paper, occasionally pausing as she wiped away tears. The Civil Rights Division has already reached out, Danielle continued, her voice carrying the weight of authority even in private conversation. They're launching a formal investigation into both the police department and the resort's practices. Yes, I'm aware of the political implications. The suite's television murmured in the background, national news networks running the smartphone footage on loop. Commentators and analysts dissected every moment, their voices rising and falling in waves of outrage and analysis. An FBI director and her family subjected to racial profiling. The implications for law enforcement reform? A stark reminder that status doesn't shield from systemic racism. A gentle knock at the suite's door caused everyone to tense. Aaron moved protectively toward his sister, while Marcus approached the door with careful deliberation. Through the peephole, he saw a young woman in a pressed suit, holding a leather portfolio. Director Morrow? The woman called softly. I'm Sarah Chun from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. We spoke earlier this morning. Danielle ended her phone call and nodded to Marcus, who opened the door. Sarah Chun entered with professional efficiency, her demeanor serious, but compassionate. Thank you for meeting with me so quickly. We want to ensure all evidence is properly documented while it's fresh. For the next 2 hours, the suite transformed into an impromptu deposition room. Sarah recorded detailed statements from each family member, her fingers flying across her laptop as she documented every moment of discrimination, from the initial boat rental suspicion to the final confrontation. The response has been overwhelming, Sarah explained as she reviewed her notes. We've already received dozens of statements from witnesses, including resort guests who observed similar incidents of profiling over the past year. Your case has opened a floodgate. Outside the suite's windows, news vans had begun gathering at the resort's entrance, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. The resort's carefully manicured drive now hosted a collection of journalists, activists, and concerned citizens. Several civil rights organizations have reached out, Marcus added, showing Sarah's phone. They want to use this incident as a catalyst for broader reform in the hospitality industry. Danielle stood by the window, watching the growing media presence below. This isn't just about one incident at one resort, she said, her voice carrying the weight of years fighting similar battles. This is about every Black family who's been made to feel unwelcome, every person of color who's been viewed with suspicion for simply existing in exclusive spaces. Sarah nodded, her fingers continuing their steady documentation. The department is particularly interested in the pattern of behavior. Your position as FBI director makes this case high-profile, but we're seeing this as an opportunity to address systemic issues across the industry. Aaron, who had been quietly monitoring social media, spoke up. They've suspended the officers involved, he reported. And the police chief is holding a press conference this afternoon. Damage control, Danielle observed grimly. They'll promise sensitivity training and policy reviews, but real change requires more than just reactionary measures. The morning sun had fully emerged, casting long shadows across the suite as Sarah continued gathering statements. Each family member's account added another layer to the narrative. Marcus's dignified anger as he described being handcuffed in front of his children, Nia's tearful recollection of watching her father's humiliation, Aaron's frustration at feeling helpless to protect his family. We've already filed preliminary injunctions, Sarah explained, organizing her documentation. We're seeking immediate review of the resort's security protocols and police department procedures. But more importantly, we want to use this case to establish new standards for anti-discrimination practices in the hospitality industry. A soft chime from Sarah's laptop announced another email. The Attorney General wants to meet with you personally next week, she informed Danielle. This case has their full attention. The weight of the moment settled over the room. What had begun as a family vacation had transformed into a potential landmark case for civil rights in modern America. The personal pain of their experience was evolving into something larger, something that might prevent other families from facing similar discrimination. What happens next? Nia asked softly, looking up from her writing. Danielle moved to her daughter's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Next, we make sure this means something. We use our voice to speak for those who don't have an FBI badge to protect them. We turn this moment into movement. Through the window, they could see resort staff erecting barriers to control the growing crowd of reporters and activists. The peaceful mountain retreat had become ground zero for a national conversation about race, privilege, and justice. The serene lake that had promised relaxation now reflected the harsh realities they'd hoped to escape, if only for a week. But as Danielle looked at her family, Marcus's quiet strength, Aaron's awakening activism, Nia's resilient spirit, she knew they would transform this trauma into triumph. The last pieces of their planned vacation were falling away, replaced by something more important, the opportunity to effect real change. Sarah closed her laptop with a gentle click. The department stands ready to support you fully in this, Director Morrow. This case has the potential to set important precedents. Good, Danielle replied, her voice carrying both determination and hope. Because we're just getting started. 3 weeks after the incident at Sunrise Peak Resort, the Morrow family stood together in the Justice Department's briefing room. The wood-paneled walls had witnessed countless press conferences, but today's gathering carried a different weight. News cameras tracked their every movement as Danielle approached the podium, her family forming a powerful tableau behind her. Good morning, she began, her voice carrying the authority that had earned her position as FBI director, yet now tinged with something more personal. 3 weeks ago, my family experienced what countless Black families face every day, the harsh reality that no amount of professional success or social status can shield us from racial profiling and discrimination. The room fell silent, cameras clicking in rapid succession as she continued. Today, I stand before you not just as an FBI director, but as a mother who watched her children learn the painful lesson that society still judges them by the color of their skin. As a wife who saw her husband handcuffed without cause. As a Black woman who, despite her position, was reminded that prejudice knows no boundaries. Marcus stood tall beside her, his principal's demeanor transformed into something more activist than educator. Aaron and Nia, both changed by their experience, carried themselves with newfound purpose. The past weeks had seen them transform from victims to advocates, their trauma crystallizing into determination. The investigation into the Sunrise Peak incident has revealed a pattern of discriminatory practices extending far beyond our experience, Danielle continued, gesturing to the stack of reports before her. In the 3 weeks since our story became public, over 200 families have come forward with similar accounts of profiling at luxury resorts across the country. This isn't about one incident. It's about a systemic problem that demands systemic solutions. The Justice Department's findings projected onto screens behind her, statistics, testimonies, and evidence of widespread discrimination in the hospitality industry. Each bullet point represented another family's story, another moment of dignity stripped away. Today, we're announcing comprehensive legal action on multiple fronts, she stated, her voice unwavering. First, a class action lawsuit against Sunrise Peak Resort and its parent company, seeking not just damages but mandatory reform in hiring, training, and security practices. Second, federal oversight of the local police department involved in our incident, with required reforms in their response protocols and bias training. Erin squeezed Nia's hand as their mother detailed the changes their experience had sparked. The past weeks had seen their social media activism grow into something more structured. They'd started a youth advocacy group, sharing their story with other teenagers and teaching them about their rights. But legal action alone isn't enough, Danielle continued, her voice softening slightly. We need to address the cultural assumptions that make people view a Black family at a luxury resort as inherently suspicious. We need to challenge the instincts that lead security personnel to respond with force rather than respect. We need to examine why, in 2024, we're still fighting these battles. Marcus stepped forward then, taking his place beside his wife at the podium. As a high school principal, he'd spent years building bridges between communities. Now, he brought that experience to a national stage. Our children asked us why we didn't just stay quiet. He spoke, his deep voice carrying emotion rarely displayed in such formal settings. Why we didn't accept the resort's offers of upgrades and settlements. We told them that sometimes standing up isn't a choice, it's a responsibility. That change doesn't come from comfort, but from confronting uncomfortable truths. The response to their story had grown beyond anything they could have anticipated. Civil rights organizations had rallied around their case, using it to push for broader reforms. The hospitality industry, facing pressure from investors and the public, had begun reviewing its practices. Police departments across the country were re-examining their response protocols to calls involving alleged trespassing and suspicious persons. This morning, Danielle announced, we're launching the Sunrise Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating racial profiling in public spaces. This foundation will provide legal support to families who face discrimination, advocate for policy changes, and work with companies to implement meaningful anti-bias training. Nia had suggested the name, taking the resort's name and transforming it into a symbol of hope rather than hurt. At 13, she'd already learned how to alchemize pain into purpose. We're also establishing a scholarship program, Marcus added, for students pursuing careers in civil rights law and advocacy. Because change requires not just awareness, but action. Not just witnesses, but warriors. The questions from reporters came rapidly after their statements, but the family handled them with practiced grace. They'd learned to share their story while protecting their dignity, to expose vulnerability while maintaining strength. Later that evening, in the quiet of their home, the family gathered in their living room. The press conference played silently on the news, but their attention was on each other. The vacation they'd planned had been lost, but something more valuable had been gained. I'm proud of us, Nia said softly, curled up between her parents on the couch, for not letting them make us feel small. Aaron, sprawled in an armchair with his laptop open to their foundation's newly launched website, nodded. We're going to help other families stand up too. Danielle looked at her family, her husband's quiet strength, her son's awakening activism, her daughter's resilient spirit. The past weeks had changed them all, but not in the way their attackers might have intended. Instead of breaking them, the experience had forged them into something stronger. You know, Marcus mused, we still need to take that vacation. A smile crossed Danielle's face as she reached for her tablet.
I was thinking about that.
But this time, Let's try that Black-owned resort in the Caribbean, the one that reached out after everything happened. They're doing amazing work with inclusive luxury tourism. Can we still go kayaking? Nia asked, a hint of her old enthusiasm returning. Baby girl, Danielle laughed, pulling her daughter close. We can do anything we want. And this time, no one's going to question whether we belong. The evening settled around them, warm and secure. Outside their window, the city continued its endless rhythm, unaware that in this living room, a family had transformed their moment of trauma into a movement for change. The vacation they'd planned might have been ruined, but the journey they'd begun held far more promise than any resort could offer. They had turned their pain into purpose, their indignation into action, their story into a catalyst for change. And somewhere, another family would walk into a luxury resort, heads held high, knowing that the Morrows had helped pave the way for them to be treated with the dignity they deserved. The sunrise, after all, didn't just mark the beginning of a new day, it heralded the dawn of new possibilities.